All right. Good afternoon, guys. This is my third attempt at this lesson. I keep making grievous errors, but I'm going to get right this time. Today's lesson is on solving quadratics. And before we go too far, a quadratic is just another term for a parabolic function. All right, for a parabola written out in standard form. All right. Specifically, it's any function of the type ax squared plus bx plus c. And we've seen lots like this. And so I'm just showing you an example really quickly here in Desmos where we can make different values of a, different values of b, and different values of c, and just float around a function like that. And so here we have an example of a quadratic function where it would be f of x equals 2x squared minus 2x minus 4, and that's the function we'd get. And today we're going to talk about solving it. And when we talk about solving an equation, what we're really talking about is letting that equation equal 0. So we're going to let the function equal 0. And we have a fancy word for when we let the function equal 0. If you look here, when the y value is equal to 0, so when we're at 0 on the y-axis, we are right on the x-axis. And every parabola has anywhere between 0 and 2 times where it crosses the x-axis, and we call these the X Intercepts. The X Intercepts are when y equals 0, so when the function equals 0, and there they are. We sometimes call these the roots, which I hope you recall, or we'll sometimes call them the zeros of the function. Any of these is possible, and it doesn't really matter which one you use. You may also hear solve. Solve is a big one. When it says solve this equation, that is the same thing as saying find the roots, find the zeros, find the x-intercepts. It's all the same thing. Now, we're going to use two methods. We're going to factor, and we're going to use the quadratic formula. And the quadratic formula is written here. We'll talk about it in a minute, but first I want to focus on the factoring method. All right? Because when we can, it's typically a lot quicker just to factor. And we're actually going to talk about a third method today as well, but it's an easy one. So anyway, the first example is to solve by factoring. And if you remember, when we factor a function, the first thing we always look for is a greatest common factor. So we'll look at this equation. Now remember, to solve for the x-intercepts, we have to let the equation, we have to make sure the function equals 0. And you'll see that here we have this quadratic function, 2x squared minus 12x minus 14, and it's equal to 0. That's the setup for solving it, because what we're saying is, what values of x can we put into this function that will make the y value 0? In other words, what values can we put in for x that will land this right on the x-axis? And we call those the y-intercepts. So we're going to find our greatest common factor. Now 2, 12, and 14 obviously have a common factor of 2. And when we divide this out, 2x squared divides by 2 to give us just x squared. Negative 12x divides by 2 to give us negative 6x. And negative 14 divides by 2 to give us negative 7. And remember, this whole thing still equals 0. Now that we've done that, we can factor this inner term. And typically what we'll use for that is, I don't know why I write the word for, is sum and product rule. And when we use the sum and product rule in this situation, we're talking about having a sum of negative 6 and a product of negative 7. Now the nice thing is, because we've taken this 2 out, we don't have to worry about the AC rule or anything like that. Now, the question is, what can we multiply together to get negative 7? Well, negative 7 is a prime number, so the only options are negative 7 and 1, or 7 and negative 1. And obviously, really quickly, they have to add up to negative 6, and so the clear choices are negative 7 and 1. Now, by our factoring rules, we know that this means we're going to keep the 2 here. That doesn't change anything. And this will now factor to 2 terms, both with an x in them. And we have x minus 7 and x plus 1. If that gives you any trouble, you need to review sum and product factoring, which we did when we did our factoring review. Now, once we've factored it, the question is, how can we make this equation equal 0? Well, the whole point of factoring, remember we talked about this when we reviewed factoring, is that it takes a formula or an equation that is involved in addition. 2x squared minus 12x minus 14 equals 0. This is all being added or subtracted. And we turn it into a multiplication question of simple terms, simple factors. So we have the number 2 multiplied by the term x minus 7 multiplied by the term x plus 1. Now to make this whole thing equal 0, any one of these can be 0, right? If you multiply 0 by any other 2 numbers, you will still get 0, right? Don't write this. But if you did 3 times 6 times 0, it doesn't matter what these 2 numbers are, the whole thing is going to equal 0. So there's 2 possible outcomes. Obviously, we can't make 2 equal 0. There's nothing you can do to the number 2 all by itself to make it equal 0. But x minus 7 can equal 0 if x equals 7. And x plus 1 can equal 0 as long as x equals negative 1. And so those are the 2 solutions. Those are the 2 roots. All right? And we can say these are the roots. That sounds vaguely like a Paul Simon song, but that's okay. Now, given that, we can look at the second method we wanted to use. And the second method we wanted to use, if you recall, was using the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula. And the quadratic formula we typically use when factoring isn't available, because it tends to be a bit more work. So in this case, really we wouldn't tend to use the quadratic because it factored very easily and quickly. And with a bit of practice, you can do that question very quickly. But if we wanted to use the quadratic formula, remember that a quadratic is of the formula ax squared plus bx plus c. That's the formula of a quadratic. So in this case, the a value is the 2, the b value is the negative 12, and the c value is the negative 14. And this should be a review. So a is equal to 2, b is equal to negative 12, and c is equal to negative 14. The quadratic equation is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now this tells you very quickly that you will get how many solutions? You will get 2 solutions. With that in mind, we can plug these numbers right into this equation and it will solve it for us quickly. We will get our x value will equal negative b, and then where the which is negative 12. Now, the negative of negative 12 is just positive 12. 2 negatives makes a positive. Hopefully that makes sense to you. And then plus or minus the square root of, and here we go, negative 12 squared minus 4. What's the a value? Well, a value is 2, so 4 times 2. And it's 4ac, so what's the c value? C is negative 14. So we put that in here. I'm going to extend that line. And we divide all of this by 2a. And remember that a is 2. Now, it is always better to put this into your calculator, if you can, in one step. All right? And I like to do that right here. And so I'm going to try punching this in here. And admittedly, I haven't done this in a long time. But so I'm going to open a bracket for the whole top, which is what you should do essentially on your calculator as well. Open a bracket and start with that 12. And then you can't do both in your calculator at once, so you have to pick one. I'm going to say 12 plus, and then on my computer, the form for square root is SQRT, but of course, on your calculator, it's usually second function x squared, but you know the button, or at least I hope you do. Then I need to do negative 12 squared, and again, you know how to do that on your calculator, minus 4 times 2 times negative 14. And then I have to close a bracket because all of that was what was being square rooted. So if you look, I've now got 12 plus square root of all this stuff here. I'm going to close the whole bracket for the top. And I'm going to divide by 2 times, I need to open a bracket for that. 2 times 2, close the bracket, equal sign. And if I've done this right, it gives me an answer. Good, and it did. And the answer it gave me was 7. So that means that my first solution is 10. X equals 7. And you will note that I did this using the plus here, 12 plus the square root. So the one I have to do next, of course, is 12 minus the square root. So I'm going to open another window here. I'm going to say 12 minus the square root of negative 12 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 14, all square rooted, divided by 2 times 2, going to equals that, and I get negative 1. And you, of course, would have to punch that into your calculator. X equals negative 1. There we go. And just keep in mind that what I'm saying is, try to use your calculator to complete this. All right, and you can pause this video now and go and take a crack at that if you like. But it really is important that you learn how to take this and plug it into your calculator quickly. So the quadratic equation will usually give you 2 outputs. Sometimes both will be the same. That can happen. That means that there's only one solution. And sometimes neither will give you an answer. And that's possible too. It is possible that a quadratic doesn't have an answer. So you may get 2 solutions, you may get 1 solution, or you may get no solution, depending on what does or doesn't work. And based on that, I would like you to do homework on page 49, numbers 1, 3, and 5. That'll be the homework for this section. But I want to just remind you here, we'll do another example, where we say, what are the X intercepts in the following questions? And we just want to remind how to find the X intercepts. So when we have x plus 5 times x minus 6, well, remember, we find the X intercepts by making the solution, or the equation rather, equal to 0. So we do that here. We're going to say x plus 5 times x minus 6 equals 0, and there's 2 ways we can do that. We can make the x plus 5 term equal to 0, or the x minus 6 term equal to 0. To make this one 0, we have to put an x value of negative 5 in. And to do this one, we have to put a value of x equals positive 6 in. And either of those will equal 0, and if either of them equals 0, then the whole thing must equal 0. So these are the solutions. And the simple note is that you can just flip the sign. As long as there's no number on the x, it's really easy. It's just as simple as flipping the sign. So if no number attached to x, just flip the sign. But if, on the other hand, there is a value attached to x, you have to follow a different procedure. But let's look at this one again. If we want the function x minus 4 times x plus 1 equals 0 to find the solutions to, well, we can make that happen by flipping this sign when x equals positive 4, or by flipping this sign when x equals negative 1. And there you have it.